All right, we'll go ahead and get started. We'll call the meeting to order. Roll call, Mary, please.
Here.
Mark Jorgensen,
Here.
Tony Platt,
Here.
Doug Kraus,
Here.
Lisa Kansas,
Here.
Chad Freeman,
Here.
Gary Spielman,
Here.
Joanne Tajus.
Here.
All right. Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we got minutes, regular meeting November 9 and special meeting November 9.
I move for approval
Second.
of both.
All right, we got a motion and a second then for the approval of both the regular meeting and special meeting on November 9th. All in favor?
Aye.
All those not, same sign. All right, welcome to those of you that ventured out on a much colder night than usual so far this year, and recognize all the visitors that are joining us over YouTube as well, so welcome.
Just a quick reference, excuse me, Chad. For those of you who are viewing through YouTube, you will notice some glitching on the screen. That is not YouTube, that is not your device. That is a video issue that we're having here with our projection, so we apologize for that, but that is on our end and not yours.
All right, thank you. We have nobody signed up for public comment, so we will move on to announcements.
You want me to read?
Yeah, go ahead.
The board may recess into closed session per Wisconsin Statute 19.85, Parent 1, Parent C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, specifically to discuss specific employees. The board will reconvene into open session for the possible transaction of business and adjournment.
All right, thank you. Then we have an agenda for tonight. Any corrections, or I'll look for an adoption?
I'll move to adopt.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second then to adopt the agenda is presented. All in favor?
Aye.
All those not, same sign. All right, moves us on to reports by the administration, starting with 9.1, School of the Month presentation by Lincoln Elementary.
All right. Hello, everyone.
Welcome.
Aye.
Well, thanks for having us. I'm Crystal Bates. I'm the principal of Lincoln Elementary, also principal of our robust virtual school, K-5.
And I'm Selena Alvin, Curriculum and Instructional Specialist, and I'll tell you a little bit more about myself in just a little bit.
All right. So we don't have a formal presentation in the same way that we've done before. We wanted you to be able to see and hear from what's going on. So you're going to hear, we have a couple of videos we're going to be showing you here in a little bit, but to start us off, to say that Lincoln has changed a little bit from last year is an understatement. So we've undergone very, very large changes this year, including our housing and running the robust virtual for the district, but also consolidating from our 2-section school into our 1-section school. And then really having to look at what does that look like. As most of you know, we are a title school, and so we've typically met our class size reduction due to our title needs. But because we were not at that same level, we had to really make sure we were doing another piece of that. And so that's where our instructional coaches come in a little bit. So we have our internal instructional coach, which is Selena. And I'll let her share a little bit about what she does with us at Lincoln Elementary and in the district.
So, as Crystal said, I'm Selena Alvin, Curriculum and Instructional Coach. I'm new to this role, but not to the district. I actually taught in the district for 10 years. I actually started my teaching at Lincoln my first year in the district. I taught 2nd grade for 1 year. And then I moved to Wilson, where I taught 4th grade for 7 years. And then I moved to Washington, where I taught 4th grade as well for 2 years. Following that, I worked for Fall River School District, and there I was a technology integration specialist and an advanced learning coordinator. And now I'm back, and I'm very happy to be back. My husband also works for the district, and my 2 boys go to school at Prairie View. So, with this being a new role, I'm sure many of you are curious about what that looks like. So I'm just going to take you through a typical week and then some of the extra things that happen above and beyond that. So Mondays and Tuesdays every week, I am at Lincoln. During those days, I am lucky enough to get to collaborate with the classroom teachers as well as the virtual teachers. We run PLCs and look at data and plan ahead for how we can best help our students during that time. On Wednesdays, I get to work a little bit with some of the middle school teachers. During that time, we get to meet individually and go through especially some online engagement strategies, because all of those teachers that I work with have at least some virtual sections. So we focus a lot on the technology piece and keeping those students engaged virtually. On Thursdays, I'm back at Lincoln again. And during that time, I get to do some classroom walkthroughs focusing on math practices and really helping those teachers beef up those math practices within their lessons. And then on Fridays, I am in my office at the ESC generally. During that time, I get a chance to meet with Rob Meyer to plan ahead for the upcoming weeks. I get a chance for some professional planning, which includes professional development, reading books that I've been given by Rob because he likes his books, and also getting a chance to look ahead at upcoming curriculum for next year and map some of that curriculum out. On top of that typical stuff for a week, I also get to meet individually with the teachers at Lincoln and the virtual teachers to set up coaching cycles. So what that looks like is we set a goal, an individual goal for that teacher, and then we get to go through that goal. We get to plan, find resources, and figure out how we're going to help meet that goal. And then we revisit that and see where we're at, looking at data from the students. And then another thing I get to do is I get to help out with interventions. So I was lucky enough to get to help with an intervention at Lincoln, which was awesome. Crystal's going to talk a little bit about that in a moment, but it was a really great experience to be able to get in there and work with the kids and with the teachers. So it was really nice to be back in the classroom again. And then the last thing I get to do is I get to work with some outside coaching. I get to work with a math coach from CISA, which is really nice with me being new to this role, to have someone from the outside coming in and helping with myself and the teachers as well.
So as Selena shared, she's been doing some work in regards to our intervention and what does that mean, what does that look like? So we sit down at the beginning of every year, we look at our data within the summer, we look at the data when the kids come in, and then we figure out what do we need to do, who do we need to continue to move, and what does that look like? And that doesn't always look like this, but what I wanted to share with you today is just an idea of what we did this year in particular to kind of look at that data, where our kids were at, how do we take that and move that into practices within the classroom so that we can move our kids to where they need to be. So this first video you're gonna watch is actually a Google Meet conversation about some of the reading instruction that took place, specifically at our 5th grade level at Lincoln. Myself, Sarah Gray, who's our reading support teacher, and then also Jake Fakes, who's our 5th grade teacher, will all be on here. So it's going to kind of go through and explain a little bit about that.
So actually, Crystal came and mentioned something to me over the summer about a big deficit that we were seeing in a group of kids in 5th grade. And so we were, it was kind of in the back of my mind. And then the beginning of the school year started, and we sat down and took a look at some iReady data and some other data. And it was like, oh, man, we need to do something. The majority of the group is really struggling, particularly with phonics. What can we do as sort of a whole class intervention? And I had attended training a couple of years ago with the other LSTs, and it was Jan Richardson's RISE training. And it's designed for a whole class, and it basically is moving kids through a guided reading rotation where they get each component of guided reading for 15 minutes, and then they move as a group. And it's supposed to really, target the kids in small groups, and it helps with differentiation. And so we thought about doing that, but we had a couple of hurdles to jump over first. We had to make sure that we could get enough people to do it with us. We had to make sure that Jake was okay with upsetting his whole reading system. So we had some talks about it, and everyone was very fired up about it, and we decided to just go forward with it and see if we could make an impact with these kiddos.
So Sarah, can you talk a little bit about, so phonics, we don't do a lot of phonics work in 5th grade, right?
Correct.
So that's really why we also needed to figure out something else, because it's not built into their curricular work, correct?
Right. We expect that a lot of their phonics instruction takes place early on, and in kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade. By 3rd grade, they're moving more toward comprehension rather than phonics. And for some reason, just a lot of these kids had just a big gap in it, and they just were struggling in that department. So my rotation was going to be the phonics table. And so we did kind of a combination of phonics and vocabulary to help build them up and see if we couldn't address that gap that we saw.
So Jake, why don't you walk us through a little bit about what did this look like in your classroom on a day-to-day basis?
So how it looked like in my classroom is we would start the day. The kids would come in right away in the morning, get everything situated, and then we'd start at about 8:45 every morning, go for about an hour. So we were, obviously with what's going on this year, we had a couple rooms available to us along with mine, so we got to rotate rooms for everybody, so it would be a quiet environment for the kids to learn. So how it would work is I would stay in my classroom and I would run the guided reading, and then Mrs. Gray and Mrs. Alvin would be in the other 5th grade room since it was empty, and they would be working on phonics and comprehension and writing strategies from the reading. And then I'd also have Mrs. Merrill work on read to self. So kids would go to her room and would read out loud to her. So, and it actually worked really well. It's an opportunity for the kids to get up and move to each classroom and not just stay in the desk, because obviously, again, this year is a little different situation. I usually have the kids come to the carpet and they're up and moving a lot, but this year they're not moving as much. So this was great for the kids to get up and move and get a little break in between also.
Did you find them to be engaged in all of the different rotations as well on a regular basis?
The kids loved it. They loved having not just me as a teacher, but they had 3 other teachers also. So they all look forward to it. I didn't hear one complaint about moving to a rotation. It was nice and quick. You got 15 minutes. It was a small group. It was very engaging. And the kids came out really excelling a lot in it. So now I'm just trying to do it with 2 people. So 4 is obviously better, but we're making do with 2 also.
So Selena, we ran into some roadblocks with some virtual shutdowns in the midst of the rotation. So can you walk us through what did this look like as we were knowing that we were planning for in-person and virtual, and then having to go virtual?
Yeah, so we had to plan ahead a little bit, knowing that it may happen while we were working with these groups, that we would go virtual. So we had to see what that would look like. So what we did was we actually just created a Google slide. I'm going to present my screen real quick. Hopefully it'll work. But I'm going to present that real quick, and then we can see what that looked like for the kids. So can everyone see my screen right now?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So the kids had to come in. They each had their different group numbers, and they could click on the door to their reading group room. And then they stayed in that one group the whole time. And then we as teachers, every 15 minutes would bounce around to those different groups. So each one of those links goes into a Google Meet, and there the kids were able to go in and still be able to get all the different things that they needed through that. So it was really actually pretty seamless. We ran into a couple hiccups with, Wi-Fi connections and things like that, but the kids handled it very, very well, and the teachers adapted very well. And I think overall it was a great experience.
All right, so we've wrapped it up. We did 6 to 8 weeks. I believe it was 8 full weeks that we did kind of that whole class work. What did we see? Did we see some growth in the kids? You guys all know I'm a data person, but what did we see overall in the data? And then Jake, what are you seeing, day to day in regards to skill wise with the kids? So I'm not sure who wants to talk about the data first. Sarah, go ahead.
I was very excited to take a look at that data. And it was very confirming to us or affirming to us that it looked really good. Particularly the first round of data. So the kids made some nice jumps, most of them. And I guess that was one of the successes that we saw some nice growth in not only the first progress monitor, but also the second progress monitor, but also that the fact that the kids were so engaged in doing the rotations. I thought that was a great success too, that they were really into it and very positive about it.
And Jake, in your classroom?
As far as in the classroom, with my guided reading group, I see the kids using a lot more of the strategies that we talk about and that I've introduced just because they're with me every single day. Every kid is with me every single day and they're reading out loud to me. So I found that, and it's, it took the 6 to 8 weeks, and then at right about 6, 8, 9 to now, they're using all the strategies. I just sit back and I can just listen, and they're figuring out words, they're understanding what they're reading a lot better, and just the enthusiasm that they're having. I can just see. They won't usually tell me because they're fifth graders, but I can see that they're, smile on their face when they figure out a tough word or when they understand what they're reading. Is really nice to see. The other thing is they're all reading a lot more. They're not reading to self and fake reading. They're actually reading out loud. So that is a big thing that I see too with their improvement just in their reading skills. And then the other thing is the reinforcement of our daily lessons in these small groups. I find the kids they understand a lot more of the craft and structure of the lessons that we have when we teach craft and structure than regular whole group instruction. So, and then the last thing is the writing about their reading. My hope is at the end of the year when we do this the whole year, that their writing and everything else is going to improve tremendously. So.
All right, so that was just a little bit of a snippet into how we might actually look at the data, use the data, drive the instruction in order to move our kids. Really exciting. They've now done several progress monitoring in that group since we started. Just shared it actually with the team here today that we, based upon the data and based upon our iReady scores, we're looking at almost all of the kids to reach that typical growth, 1 year's growth predicted, but then also a good chunk, almost 60% of them could be very close to actually meeting their stretch growth, which would be pushing them in and closing that gap. And we're hoping that we might gain a little bit more. And that's what we want to do. We want to close that gap. We want to move the kids as much as we can. And then I also, Jake talked about how they're using those strategies, and that's what we want to be able to do. We want to fill their toolbox so that they have some of these strategies so that when they are tackling those big ideas with comprehension and problem solving, that they have the tools that they can utilize no matter what they are attacking in order to be able to kind of work through those tough situations. So really kind of an exciting opportunity for us. We're very thankful that we were able to do that this year and kind of make that happen. So the second piece that we want to share a little bit about is our virtual and in-person students and what that looks like, because that's obviously huge. So we met, actually I believe it was August when we first kind of talked about where we were going, and this wasn't on the table that Lincoln was going to smash into one section and we were going to house the virtual. And so when Nicole and Rob sat me down at the table with Brandon and said, hey, this is what we're thinking, sounded like a great idea. and then we figured it out. So it was a lot of work. I do have to say there's lots of big changes. A couple of things we have, just so you know, we have 125 kids on site at Lincoln. We're typically a little over 200. We have over 280 K-5 robust virtual students that we are also working with and serving at Lincoln Elementary. We added 4 new teachers to Lincoln Elementary this year, which is huge. You're going to meet them soon. And we also added an additional 2 teachers on top of that we've brought in from Jefferson and Prairie View to also assist with their teaching of our virtual kids. I am just so incredibly impressed with the team that I'm working with in regards to our virtual school. They are problem solvers. It has been hard work that we never imagined, and they have navigated those challenges like champs, and they have reached out and worked with each other and helped each other through numerous problems and always looking for solutions so that they are trying to figure out how can we do it better for our students. And every day we are learning, every single day. So with that, we're actually going to take a little peek inside to meet some of those teachers that I just talked about, and then also hear from some of our kids in our virtual programming about what they think of virtual school.
Hello, my name is Valentina Zelenko. I teach social studies and science in first grade and kindergarten. This is my first year with the Beaver Dam Unified School District. I am married to my wonderful husband, Paul. Together we have 2 little girls, Anya and Katya. We live about 35 minutes away from Beaver Dam in Green Lake County.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Antill, and I am a virtual 3rd grade teacher here in Beaver Dam. I am new to Beaver Dam. I came from the Twin Cities in Minnesota, from a northwestern suburb. I'm currently in my 7th year of teaching. I taught 3rd grade for 5 years and K through 5 technology for 1 year. So this year teaching virtual instruction is kind of fun for me.
Hi, my name is Alexandra Sanders. I am the 4th grade virtual teacher for the district. I currently teach math and science for 4th grade. I am new to the district. I just recently came from Savannah, Georgia, so I'm super excited to be here.
Hi, I am Cassandra Cruxon. I am the virtual 4th grade teacher, and I teach ELA and social studies. And I am not new to the district, but I am new to 4th grade. Before this, I was teaching 4K at Rainbow Connection Childcare.
Hello, my name's Charlotte. I'm in virtual school, 1st grade. And here's what I like about school. I love Mrs. Beta. I think she's a great teacher, and I love the lives because I can talk to my friends, and we have Will You Rather Wednesday, and we could have scavenger hunts. And Mrs. Z, she teaches science, and I love science. We're learning, we used to learn about stems, and we're learning about habitats, and then we're going to learn about animals, and I love animals. And I love RAS Kids because we can read books and there's questions, and I love it.
Hello, fellow members of the Beaver Dam School District. My name is Angeline Garcia, but you guys can call me Angie. My 4th grade teacher this year is Mrs. Sanders. Now, I will be explaining some reasons why I like virtual school. The first one is that you have to be safe for the pandemic right now. You guys don't want to get infected. The second one is you get to do a lot of fun activities virtual. Number 3 is you honestly get to meet your teacher better. Number 4 will be that you can honestly, if you're not understanding it, you can just tell your teacher, oh, I'm not understanding it, and she can attend a meeting with her. You can attend a meeting with her, and she will help you.
Number 5 will be that you can have lunch whenever you want if you're hungry. Hello, my name is Kellen Davis. I am in 4th grade with Miss Sanders. I really like virtual learning. I like it because I feel safe during this pandemic. I like that I can go at my own pace and set up a schedule that I can follow. I still get small group with my teacher that is at my level. We have fun group discussions that helps keep me social. I can ask my teacher for help when I need it. Virtual learning is fun and I enjoy the way my teacher teaches us.
All right, so those were just a few looks into our world that we get to enjoy every single day. Super big shout out to all of our virtual parents who have been great at sending into all of the pictures of their learners at home so that we can see how things are going and what they're doing as well. So what questions do you have for us at all?
Well, I'll start out by just saying I totally enjoy these presentations in this whole new COVID-related world we're in because teaching and learning has been different this year. The presentations for School of the Month have been different, and I almost would say they're almost more entertaining this year than in the past just because of the way we're doing it. So I appreciate all the work you guys put into it.
Thanks.
So how does collaboration go with your teachers that are virtual and in person?
Yeah, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure.
Go ahead.
So at the beginning of the year, Crystal set up specific times that everyone has common planning time. So during those times, we have Google Meets set up in the Google Calendar. So it's every week, those same times set up, those same Google Meets are there. So if the virtual teachers can come on site, sometimes they'll come on site and we all have our masks on, we meet in a room spread out and we chat in person. And if not, if they can't come on site for that day, then they join through the Google Meet and we're all able to meet that way. And then, if there's specific data, things that we're looking out, Crystal generally has that shared out ahead of time, or we're able to present screens and things like that, and we're able to chat that way.
So they're able to pace about the same whether they're virtual or in person? They're about at the same point in their lessons?
It varies. For Lincoln, absolutely they are. They're doing a lot of the collaboration work together. We took a little bit of extra time. A lot of our, like for example, our third grade teachers are teaching in person and virtually. They're kind of sharing that role a little bit. But because they're also collaborating so closely with their grade levels, all of ours are pretty close as to where they should be. It's always off a little bit. You know, some are more than others, but our goal is like by the end of the semester that like all of our fourth grade teachers would be in the same place. Similar to what you would have like at the high school level or the middle school level, so.
Okay.
Other questions, comments?
I really enjoyed the presentation. Those kids are so cute. That was
They're-
adorable.
they're
Thanks for sharing
adorable.
that.
Yeah, it's been really neat to see, so. And
Awesome.
we have a lot of really great families that are just so incredibly supportive of their kids and the teachers, no matter where they're at. You know, even when we went virtual for that week after Thanksgiving at Lincoln, we had an amazing turnout for our attendance-wise as well. And it's just really been all hands on deck. Our TAs have been assisting on Canvas and with our kids and everyone. So it's just our whole world of what we used to do is completely changed. But definitely we are figuring out some really great ways to still connect and to continue to move our kids.
So I do have another question. So on the first video, you showed that great, you talked about that great strategy. So when that worked for that group and that rotation finished that 8 weeks, so then do you take that to, do you have another group identified that you take that same strategy to, or do you always change it up based on what they need?
Yeah, great question. So when we're looking at what our students need or anything like that, we're always looking and doing checkpoints in on the data. So Sarah Gray and I meet on a regular basis to really kind of look at our data. Where are we at? Do we need to change our groups? Who's getting different types of intervention and what does that look like? So we wouldn't necessarily take that specific intervention or that strategy and try it in another place. We need to make sure that it's going to fit whatever the needs of the student or the group are at that time. So we're not right now utilizing that specific strategy with anyone else, but we've built our toolbox as well instructionally, I think, so that we can utilize, I think, you know, even like Jake, he's like, I've learned some of the things that I can be able to do to help kids who might struggle in this area on a regular basis. So now he's built that toolbox as well moving forward, which is a great thing. Nice. So, you know, we often, you know, with our reading support teachers, a lot of times they might pull out a little bit more. Well, this was an opportunity to really push in and work with each other so that we're all growing. And that's what we want, so.
Thank you.
I would just like to rep my Lincoln alumni pride.
That's right.
Looking at the fifth grade spelling bee champion here.
I think your name's on the wall somewhere, so.
You guys took it down. It used
Oh,
to be.
did we?
We painted.
Crystal, I just wanted to add that before everything went to Lincoln to be the virtual site and everything like that, I know I heard some worries, some concerns from teachers and staff and parents, but this looks like you've addressed those issues and have come together. I think that's great. The teamwork is what's needed, and it really shows.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's been a rocky road, right? We know it's a huge, big change of the way that we've done things, but they've just been a tremendous team, and they're working really hard, and they're listening to our parents, and they're listening to the students, and a lot of it has been a trial and error. This works, this doesn't, okay, well, then let's figure it out, and let's work through it together. Flexibility has been key, not only for our in-person students and teachers, but also for our virtual families and our virtual students and parents as well. So we greatly appreciate the entire Lincoln family that we've been working with this year.
Did you have issues with some of the families and their connectivity to the virtual sites?
Being connected?
Right.
Yeah, so not all of them are Lincoln, right? Lincoln does have 27% of our kids that are enrolled in the virtual, but there's a whole other group, right? But our teachers spent a great time building that rapport, building the relationships. The harder piece has been we've had constant flow of kids into robust virtual. So while they did a lot of learning curve in the beginning, you know, getting those kids up to speed has been different, but they have just done an awesome job of building relationships, meeting teachers, meeting with the parents and the families when they do need help. And so really kind of reaching out in the best way possible. You saw some of the kids say like they have a good rapport and relationship with their kids, and that's what we wanted. You know, some more than others, I would think, but that's kind of regular, but they're definitely working hard to make sure that kids are feeling connected.
Anybody else? All right.
Thank
Well,
you,
I appreciate
everyone.
the presentation. Thank you very much.
Nice work. Thank you.
Yes. So that brings us to 9.2. We have a donation.
Sorry. Don't mind me at all. I'm good. All right. So the district will be receiving a donation from Jason Brass, who is a close family friend of the family of Matthew T. Gall, MD. Matthew was a 1988 graduate of BDHS who passed away last Thanksgiving. On behalf of the family, Mr. Brass is making a donation to our high school science department in Matthew's honor in the amount of $20,000. The science department plans to use the donation to improve an instructional space at the high school and to start an arboretum. The donation will be made to the district as a stock transfer, and we are working with a local financial advisor with whom we currently work with another investment that's similar to this one. And they can then assist us with liquidating the stock as we need it to fund the projects.
I make a motion that we accept this generous gift on behalf of the Gall family.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second then to accept the donation as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those not? Same sign? All right, a huge thank you to the family. Thank you very much. That moves us to 9.3, at-risk programming update.
Good evening. We're here to talk a little bit about at-risk programming and updates to at-risk programming over the course of the planning over the course of this school year, and then implementation over the course of the summer. And this will also prove to be a longer-term project. So Jesse Peters and myself will be going through some of the planned changes and the basis for those changes. And this is also a summarized report from the report that you would have seen at Teaching and Learning a few weeks ago. But the first thing that we want to do is look at who we are talking about, what group of students we are discussing here in serving with at-risk programming. At-risk programming is designed by statute to serve a particular group of students. And you can see that the students that are by statute defined as at risk are either dropout students or students that have 2 or more of the following: 1 year behind their age group or more in number of credits attained, 2 or more years behind their age group in basic skill levels. They are considered truant, they are parents, adjudicated delinquents, or 8th grade pupils whose score in each subject area in the state assessment was below basic during their 8th grade year, which we really find out that data in 9th grade. So I just want to point that out to you as the programming that we're talking about is, number one, we must provide as a school district because it's statute-based, but there's also a particular group of students that we must analyze and offer this programming for. So Jesse's going to go ahead and make that alignment of the plans that you'll see in a few minutes, relate that back to our strategic plan.
Good evening. So programming for at-risk students aligns directly with 3 of our core strategies. First of all, it connects with the student growth and achievement. We know that we want all of our students to be able to have equitable access to educational services, and we know that we need to be supporting all of the social, emotional, physical, mental health needs for all students. It also directly relates to staff effectiveness and development. As you'll hear a little bit later in the presentation, one of the best practices in supporting students that are at risk is regular data tracking and progress tracking, so that connects back to that staff development and effectiveness piece. The third way that it aligns directly with our core strategies is district and community engagement. As we build at-risk programming for our students, we want to be able to build and increase some of our partnerships, some of our offerings, having students in area business and industry, working with some of our area organizations as well. As we talk about at-risk programming, we are going to be developing programming for all of our students, K-12, but really the focus for next school year, the 2021 school year, is on supporting the at-risk students at our high school age level. So that's grades 9 through 12, but it also includes our students that are past their graduation date, our 5th, 6th, 7th year seniors. We want to make sure that we have programming in place for them as well. Beyond that, K-12, as we move into refining our response to intervention practices and processes, that will really dovetail with our at-risk supports and thereby support and help our elementary students that would be considered at risk, our middle schools students that would be considered at risk, and even our high schoolers as well. So I wanted to connect with some of the historical supports we've provided at the high school level for students. Some of these are current and some of these are things that have happened in the near recent past. Some of the ways we've supported students at the high school level in the past are advisory groups where staff members connect with students in academic and non-academic ways, helping them with school skills and life skills. Before and after school sessions, providing some extra time for students to work with the material that they need. ALEX and APEX are two programs that we currently have at the high school level that are credit recovery programs, credit attainment programs. CASH, or a guided study hall type program, again, to provide students with a little bit of extra time or focus on some of the areas they may need some support with. Cross-content studies, or CCS, that's a program that we currently have in place where we have multiple teachers at the high school from multiple content areas working with students and also providing some social and emotional supports. Counselors and all of our PPS staff at the high school level work closely not only with all students but especially with students that are considered at risk. Don Smith Learning Academy, that's been a separate school that is focused on supporting the needs of at-risk students, and in recent history that's been focused on credit recovery, credit attainment for students. Summer school is also another program that a large portion of that focuses on credit recovery and credit attainment, and then virtual school programming. Prior to this year even, we have had students participate in the Wisconsin Virtual School Program just as a different means of programming and supporting some of our at-risk students.
So with that, we're going to talk for a few minutes about, or for just a moment, about what best practice is. So as we plan modifications and enhancements to the programming that we offer students, we're keeping 4 main ideas in mind, and these are research-based ideas on working with students who may be considered at risk or dropout students. First off is student data tracking. So we need to make sure that we have a system for monitoring student progress, academic achievement, growth, credit attainment, all of those things, so we can make sure that we are monitoring our successes as a school district, as a program, and then intervening where we need to with students. Mentors and adults connecting with students. So that piece of data would show up in programs where we would have somebody really assigned to work with students who would be considered at risk, get to know them on a personal level, and create specific plans for each student. So research would show that having an adult that becomes an advocate for a student is critical. Real relevant curriculum. So the more that the curriculum that we use in general curriculum, but in any program, is relevant to the students we serve. And that seems like common sense, but we really sometimes have to make an effort to do that for the student so that they see the value in their learning. And a great way to do that is to connect as much of the learning as possible back to the community, because obviously the community is around us and is very real. Smaller learning communities is another part about reducing that teacher-to-student ratio for students that would benefit, to be able to better build relationships, meet individual needs, and really monitor their progress. And so that idea of mentoring and adults connecting to students in smaller learning communities kind of go hand in hand, as well as a real relevant curriculum, because you have to get to know the group of students to know how best to connect. Looking at what we're intending to do, or how we're intending to look at this process, is through a continuum. So we want to make sure that our efforts serve students, serve all students. They can be customized or combined. But we really need to think about this as a spectrum of supports, or a continuum of services, where we are going to set up efforts across the school district and across the grades where we have preventative measures for students at risk. So all the way down to the earliest grade levels, we're monitoring student achievement, we're monitoring data, we're monitoring attendance, we're monitoring all those things that we know would indicate good learning opportunities for students. We would make sure that we have preventative options in place, interventions to support students. And then we migrate to some additional supports that might be more supportive. So supportive programming for at-risk students that would keep students in as much what we might think of as regular education or mainstream traditional education as possible, but maybe providing that advocate or providing additional resources or interventions to help those students be successful. And then we move into the intensive programming for students at risk, where we're really talking about for students that need it and opt for those programs that might look more non-traditional, maybe that small group learning approach. And all of these programs that we would be modifying or creating would be going back to those 4 ideas of data tracking. What is the information showing what our students need? How do we develop adult connections and relationships? How is the curriculum relevant to students? And how do we provide smaller learning groups or smaller learning environments for students? So as we think about this and as we plan this, Jesse's going to go into some of those different components in a moment. But what we're asking you as a school board to consider is that you certify the Union of At-Risk Services from Beaver Dam High School and Don Smith Learning Academy as separate entities into one entity so that we can mix, match, and combine as much of those services as possible, increase our staff-to-student ratio as well. And the second part that we would ask is that you authorize the continued planning and implementation of at-risk programs over a 2 to 3 period. Formally, the school board would adopt our programs for next school year in the summer, and that is per statute. By August 15th, the school board certifies at-risk programming annually. So again, because of this continuum of services that we're looking at, we're really looking to unify those services under one entity, still maintaining the great things from Don Smith Learning Academy, small group learning environments, still offering some off-site services, but really multiplying the staff that we have and multiplying the opportunities that we have for students. And I know Jesse will speak to that a little bit as well. Yep.
So one of the pieces I just wanted to clarify too, as Rob mentioned, with the integration of services for at-risk students under the high school roof or umbrella, is that physically not all of the programming and services would take place per se in this building. Again, the idea is that we want to provide multiple options for our students, and as we can get students out, having some opportunities in the workforce, in the community, there can be programming physically taking place for students virtually. There can be programming taking place, again, at some community locations or at some other building locations within the district too, whether it's our administrative building or the Don Smith building or what that may be. But the idea of integrating the at-risk services under one entity, under one place, really is because of three main reasons. There's three large benefits to that. And one of those, as Rob mentioned, is the increase in ability to access staff. You know, that's one of the key components is those student-adult ratio or student-adult connections. Having at-risk programming focused from the high school building allows our students that are at risk to have access to more staff and more staff with specialized skills. If a student is struggling in the area of math, they have licensed math teachers connected to them at the building. If a student is struggling with social emotional needs, there are a greater number and variety of staff, pupil service staff, that would be more easily connected with students through this building. We also think about the ability to connect students with courses and extracurricular opportunities. Currently, students, whether they're at the high school building or the Don Smith Learning Academy building, they have options to take courses through the high school, extracurriculars through the high school. But two buildings, two different schedules, sometimes they don't jive, and that puts barriers up for some of our at-risk students. Even though they're closely aligned physically, just the difference in moving from one building to another building at times puts up some barriers for our students. So the idea that would be, as we talk about some of the flexible programming, having things occur within one building mainly, just makes that easier for some of the students to be able to access extracurriculars, student groups, clubs, courses, all of that. So again, that then speaks to kind of that third point where, as we look to have more options for our students that are at risk, and some of those being more specialized, having that combination of ability to have some of this specialized programming for the at-risk needs, along with some traditional programming too, under one entity, that is more possible. So I'm going to talk about next is I'm going to go back into the continuum of services that Rob spoke to, and we talked about having preventative services, some supportive services, and some intensive services. So I want to share what that would typically look like, and then bringing in those 4 best practice areas for each of those as well. So when we think about preventative measures, as Rob mentioned, and you heard even from our Lincoln presentation earlier, that one of the key pieces is that data tracking. And at a preventative level, that is really specific, responding to specific needs, understanding that a student has struggled with a specific concept or a specific standard, and then providing timely, specific learning on those concepts to get them caught up. So that's how that also connects then to the relevant curriculum. Thinking about adult and student connections, again, as Mr. Meyer explained, one of the key pieces is bringing in more adult connections to help be advocates for students. So starting to build in some of those connections. And then that smaller learning group or that smaller learning environment, the purpose of a preventative measure as a preventative measure is, again, it's very targeted for short, specific times and short, specific reasons. All of those things do happen and can happen under one building, one entity. As we move along the continuum into the supportive programming, that's where things start to become a little bit, intensify a little bit more. So the data tracking, now there are more frequent reviews of student progress, more communications among individuals about how students are doing. The adult-student connections, we start to move to decreased student-staff ratios, and thereby increasing more adults that are connected to the student or teamed up with the student to help support them. That curriculum now, there's still the same endpoint in the concept or the essential standard that needs to be learned, but there are multiple methods to be able to have a student achieve that. And then again, for that the learning environment, now there may be portions of the day where the student is getting some specialized programming or smaller group programming for their specific needs. So again, the idea of even at a larger physical building such as the high school, you can still have programming with small groups for students. And then as we get into the intensive programming, that data becomes very, very frequent. That's weekly or daily check-ins with students and how they're progressing, and with the team that's working with them on how they're going to continue to grow and meet their goals. Those adult-student connections, even more, that ratio of student to staff decreases, and even more individuals, staff members or adults are connected with the students. That curriculum now in that intensive programming becomes, you still have the same endpoint to get to in the learning, but it's done via alternative means. Maybe that is on-the-job training. Maybe that's performance-based examples of those skills or competencies. Maybe it's competency-based instruction or education. And then you think about that smaller learning groups or smaller learning environments. For students that have that intensive at-risk need, the majority or the entirety of their day is within that at-risk programming for the time that they need that.
As we close, I just want to reiterate a few points. The programs that we're investing in, we will have opportunities for students that need intensive needs, but we're also going to provide a heavier investment than we've probably seen recently in some of those preventative options for students. And we really want to make sure that we have a variety of options. Some of those could be mixed and matched for each student's needs, but we really want to try to provide a more individualized approach for students. And again, providing that opportunity to have that under one entity allows for, as Jesse pointed out, more staffing, more supports for that. The other part that I want to share is, as you're listening to this and as people are listening, we gave some examples, but we might be thinking about academic supports, and some people might be thinking about social, emotional, or behavioral supports. The academic behaviors needed to be successful. When we design these programs and options for students, we're talking about both. We are talking about having academic supports for students. So a preventative option would be just what was mentioned before in the Lincoln presentation. Students are not academic achieving, highly academic achieving. We know we want students to be reading at their grade level in elementary school. So if they're not, we would provide some academic interventions. But we'd also monitor students in data to determine, is there an academic gap or is there an academic behavior gap? Do students not have the stamina to read? It's not a skill issue, but it's a stamina issue. So do we need to provide supports for academic behaviors and or academic skills? And those would all be represented in the programs that we would move forward with. Anything else, Mr. Jesse? All right, we entertain questions or discussion, if you would have that at this time.
So I'm hoping for a little bit more information, I guess. I feel like a vote on that is kind of like a carte blanche. You guys do what you're going to do. Is there a way that we can kind of get a roadmap? Like, what is it going to look like for an expectant school-age mother going into this program? What is it going to look like for, a youth that struggles with a regular class setting? How is this going to roadmap for them? I mean, are they going to report to the high school just like everybody else? And are they going to kind of get swallowed up or drowned in the day-to-day bustle that they're not getting at DSLA? I'm hoping that we can have like a little bit more of a I don't know a better word for it, a roadmap, on what this is going to look like. And, I'm just...
Specific samples and scenarios of those situations broken out.
Yeah, like what's going to happen to some of these kids. And with the DSLA staff, I mean, each of them are very individually, emotionally invested into every one of their students. Like, how does that change by bringing them into the bigger building? What will happen to the older building? What classes, what supports will be taking place physically at that location? I mean, are they gonna, if you're a school-age mom, are you gonna wanna be paraded about in a large setting of your peers where a lot of them might feel more comfortable in a smaller setting? What's gonna happen with that? Where's that gonna end up?
Sure, I can address a few of those, and then maybe Jesse can jump in on some things that I miss or add on to help answer that question. First off, the supports that we would offer, we would come up with the different programs, and we have some pretty good ideas of what they are, but we're working with staff, including staff at DSLA, staff from the high school, staff from the middle school, to plan and coordinate those, look at benefits and drawbacks of those. And again, those would be annually approved by the school board, and that's per statute. But we would be looking at, so a particular student would be able to probably choose from more than one program. By statute, staff are, if we have more than one program that would fit a student's needs, they would be able to opt in for those. So we would come up with some options, some prerequisites potentially for those, and then so we could sit down and make plans with each specific individual student that would best fit them. And then we would also monitor that data, so if that isn't working for that student, we can either, we can cause prompt changes in the programming for that student. As far as some of the physical space that you mentioned, staff at, I guess I'll go back to where we serve people. Because we combine the entities together, does not mean that every service would happen out of the high school. So we know that there are some students that might need a blended approach. They might, some of our, we'll say our fifth year senior, sixth year senior programs, maybe it's a parent that is committed to other things during the school day. We know that we may have to have some alternative programming, including off-site programming for those students. Again, the combination of the two entities is really to multiply the staff and the supports that we have, not eliminate or even reduce small group instruction or opportunities for students.
Yeah, I'll just add, Tony, that continuum up there has some empty boxes, and there's no magic number of boxes or anything either, but that's where we'd put in some of those other key pieces for different specific at-risk needs. And we have some development of what those may be, as Rob mentioned, and vetting those with some staff as well, but then thinking about it for each of those opportunities as you kind of get into those supportive and intensive pieces, there are these are the prereqs to get into some of those, this type of student or this type of need is what it benefits. And then balancing that with what Rob said is at-risk students, they do have that right to, and families, they have that right of that menu of options. So they may say, I feel this piece and this piece would best suit my needs.
So I guess I kind of like that you don't have all the answers, because kids don't fit in any category. They're all different. So I like that you're saying that it's an individual approach. But I'm wondering how you limit, I mean, I've been involved in the high school a lot of years, and there are a ton of kids that would benefit from this kind of program, that probably many more than that we've been serving that fit in your definition of at-risk. How large do you expect this group to be, or how do you limit the size of this group?
Well, we go back to the DPI definition of at-risk, because again, there's all the things we talked about tonight are great for every student. Adult connections, relevant curriculum, data tracking, monitoring, that's good for everybody. But we know on top of that, we have to do some extra specific work in those areas for our students that are identified at risk. And the preventative measures, those are going to be, most of those are open for any student anyway, because we want all students to be successful. Mm-hmm. It's then layering some of the things on top. And you're right, some of the things that we do, just like as we learn any type of new program, we'll say, wow, this really benefits everybody. And here's some things that I'm doing in my classroom or within this program that, hey, you want to see it in action? Because then another teacher could decide, I want to use that in my program, in my classroom as well.
Do you have a number of kids, because I'm assuming it's way more than we're physically at the DSLA, that qualify for this by definition for at-risk right now?
That's a good question. I don't have those numbers, but I can get those to you.
I mean, it's significantly more than we're at DSLA. Do you have an idea?
If we think about, no, I guess I would have to.
That's okay.
Just because of the different categories, but I do not have that on hand.
Okay.
Well, and to jump off of what Joanne just said, my dream would be that what you are envisioning is that our first emphasis is on the at-risk needs at grades 9 through 12. But then we need to focus even deeper into the K-12, the younger students, so that we can get those interventions to them earlier, which theoretically should cause them to succeed sooner and continue to succeed, which then could minimize those numbers.
Absolutely. Over time, we hope to see that happen. We're investigating and we're planning revisions to our RTI, or Response to Intervention model, K-12, that really works on the left side of that, the preventative side. And we're also making sure that our Tier 1, our universal instruction, what we provide to students every day, considers what we see as that great research-based instruction to prevent a lot of this from, a lot of need for at-risk supports. Essentially, we try to work ourselves, whittle down the opportunities that we have to have for at-risk. We know that there will be always students that need to take advantage of those. But yeah, the general idea is that we are monitoring what we're doing all of the time at all grade levels and providing supports for students to keep students as far left on that as appropriate for that individual student.
And I can guarantee you that one of the major concerns of many of us who have attended many Don Smith Learning Academy graduations and toured the facility is that we know there are children out there, there are young adults out there who don't thrive and survive in a traditional school setting. So whether it's there or whether it's Dr. Seuss, here or there or somewhere else, it needs to have those components for them to survive and thrive.
So I just want to make it really clear, so I'm going to ask the question and let you answer it. This is not just for kids, and you've mentioned it a little bit, but I want it to be super clear, that are academically at risk. It can be at risk for a number of reasons, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it goes back to that definition, and that's where I balked at when you asked the numbers of students, because we know the students that academically, due to credit deficiency, we know those numbers, but off the top of my head, I don't have all those other pieces combined as well into that.
Because you talked about, the academically, you talked about social behavior. It could be a life event that makes it impossible, difficult for them to attend school. So for any number of reasons, you will be able to serve way more kids this way than you've been able to help before, in different ways. Some maybe not needing a lot of support, just a little.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that we're really concentrating on here as well is, again, diversifying the supports, because we have some supports in place. We need to strengthen those preventative options. We need some more support in that middle of the road, because we kind of go from some preventative to kind of a credit recovery option, instead of some ongoing supports that might keep students more closer to some of the traditional options that we may offer.
Mm-hmm. And this may be a program that somebody just needs help for a year, and then they're caught up and they're back in a more traditional setting.
And that is a huge advantage of the model that we're proposing, as well as those options. So they may need, a student may just need a resource period with an at-risk teacher to help them with the academic behaviors that they need to be successful, and those students can be successful in biology class, math class, whatever, with their peers. And some students might need some more small group instruction, but would be able to take all of those elective options that might be career-based and really relevant to them. So that's what we're really looking for, is an all-in approach on the students instead of silos of opportunities for students.
Yeah, and absolutely, Joanne, we're looking to provide students what they need when they need it. So we're not saying that if a student after a semester, or maybe even after a term in some cases, has what they need, that they would need to continue in one of the at-risk program
So I can see this as a pretty big advantage, that all these kids remain students at Beaver Dam High School, and they don't have a label of a DSLA student or a high school student or a at-risk student. It's all fluid. They can be in, they can be out, just doing what is needed to serve them best.
So you mentioned the fifth-year senior, then how would they be able to go to the different location, or how does that play out? Like, that was a good example of
Yeah.
a fifth-year
So-
senior, you didn't graduate last time. Now you have to come to the big building and see everybody that, that was a junior before is now your peer again, where before they were in a smaller building. Are they going to physically come to the high school, or how does that's what
Well-
I'm trying to wrap my head around.
That's what we'd have to decide yet, is where some of those exact locations for some of those programs would be. And really, I don't foresee that we'd have 5th, 6th, 7th year seniors coming to the high school during the student day, at least and certainly not mixing with the regular high school population, just for a number of reasons. But there could be at different times that it could happen here at this building, or it could happen at a different location other than this building.
Because I really agree. I like where you guys are going with it. I'm worried about the small and separate atmosphere of the DSLA that we have.
I can't
losing
speak
that.
to, I can say that we've talked about a number of program options. We've talked about all of those things. We're just at this point, we're working through those. So I want to be, to say that we are going to do X or Y, that's what we need a little bit of time for, to be able to bring those back to the school board later this spring and summer. But I can say we've talked about such things based on what students' needs are. So really getting more granular onto the students that we currently serve and their needs for next school year. But we've talked about different programming, such as that 5th year plus senior group that would likely need to be off-site, either in a district building or community building of some type. We've talked about a potential location of some of the programs within the high school that may have a separate entrance. We've talked about knowing that there's some students that don't have the academic stamina for full day programming, and that is one of the advantages that DSLA has. So where and how can we do that? So those things are all on the radar. We just have to get down to looking at what programs are going to fit the students that we have next year. And then we also have to be aware that as we identify students and develop the programs, that there still are options by statute for our families of how they choose to approach it and if they want to opt in, which adds just another layer of complication to these supports and the potential numbers that we might be looking at.
Yeah, so the presentation has you wanting us to look at this in January, so I'm hoping that we can have some more of those things, locked in by January before we make a decision.
Yeah, I know Mark obviously took some notes, but I would ask that, individually, if you guys have additional questions and concerns, reach out to Mark or Rob or Jesse, and they can answer those individually, or if necessary, obviously come back in January with some additional information.
And I would also reference the school board back. We did in the teaching and learning committee. So if we go back to that, when we outlined what the potential for some of those programs that might have some more of those particulars as examples, then we may be covered this evening.
And we do anticipate that we're going to be speaking on this topic, again, at Teaching and Learning in January as well, before, okay.
Yep.
Yep.
I have one more question. It's brief. It sounds like there's, in your planning and in your implementation of this, it sounds like there's always going to be a fluidity based on needs, based on who you're serving. So what you're saying you're going to start with this next year might look entirely different in a couple years as you continue to grow and evolve and tweak and have different students.
That I would agree, yes. We know that we will have a number of programs that we'll be able to put into place next year. We know we'll learn from that and modify that. But we also know that there are some program options we will want to put in place that we would not have ready for next school year. So we're going to take what we have in place, make appropriate modifications or adjustments to those, add a certain level of programming, and then we'll continue to evaluate and add. I'll use the example of the GED Option 2 program, which is a GED option where students can prepare for and take assessments. and they would then be able to earn the high school diploma. Based on that, we know that we will not have the structure and support for that in place going into next year, and there's an approval process for that. But then a goal as we enroll these programs would be to, over the course of next school year, have that ready for likely the 22-23 school year. So it's not an all-in at once approach. We're going to try to do things, plan and do things extremely well, rather than do more things not as well.
We also know that as we roll into implementation of some of these pieces, next year we would anticipate we'd have a higher number of juniors and seniors that are credit deficient because there hasn't been some of the at-risk programming for them when they were pre-high school or at their freshman, sophomore year. So the idea would be the more we do early on, then that's going to change what we have to do later on in the student's career too. So understand that if we have to focus a lot on credit recovery potentially next year or maybe for the next 2 years, then we can hopefully move out of that realm as we do more supportive programming early on.
Thank you.
Other questions? So then we'll look to, again, if you have additional questions or questions come up, get them to Rob or Mark, and we'll look to have further discussion then in January committees, and then probably look to act on this at-risk programming in February. All right. Thank you very much. All right, 9.4, return to school plan update. Mr. DeStefano.
Good evening. All right, so for those who have heard this type of an update for the first time, one of the first things I'm going to do is run through some things that we would typically just talk through regarding monitoring or otherwise. At the end of the presentation, there are 3 distinct actions I'm going to be requesting that the board take. If there's any questions as I'm going through it, that would be great. Otherwise, you can wait till the end to hit me up on a few of those. So first things first, monitoring. We continue to be very active in our monitoring, whether that be our regular conversations with the Health Department of Dodge County, monitoring different numbers that impact our school districts. Prior to about 3 weeks ago, we had been monitoring the 7 census tracts specifically and individually, and kind of charting those out and keeping track of that. One of the things that the Wisconsin Department of Health has now done for all school districts has identified a district boundary map, which essentially encompasses those 7 census tracts. And we're now looking specifically at that because it is actually more accurate than the 7 census tracts because there was some overlap in some of those census tracts that would have trended outside of our district boundary. That said, our current 3-week average for the district boundary reports, cases impacting our school district boundary, again, that's not of our staff, that's not of our students, that's all people that are in our boundary area. The 3-week average is down 1.55%. So that's the first time we've seen any type of a trend really downward in our census tract area or now the district boundary. So that is definitely a celebration, and we hope that that trend would continue. And of course, we do always publish district COVID-19 numbers on the website. At our last meeting, one of the things that I had shared with the board was just a chart of some of the cases that impact our students and staff, as well as the quarantines that impact our students and staff over time. So since that time, we have seen a little bit of a trend downward, which we're hopeful and optimistic that that will continue. You see that after essentially, we'll call it the Thanksgiving holiday, things from a case standpoint were very similar to the week or even 2 weeks prior, but we'll notice that the quarantine numbers, obviously the impact had gone down. And then 2 weeks post that holiday, we see that our case numbers did drop significantly, which was very positive. Positive, I guess, is a weird term to use. But good. And then we see that our quarantines continue to trend down. So this is something to be optimistic about. This is not something to start to consider any, I think, overly significant changes relative to our plan or otherwise. I think the idea of letting our guard down or thinking things are just going to be, going away is not a healthy one. We need to be steadfast in a lot of our efforts. But I think it gives us the opportunity and hope to start to think about planning forward, which I'll talk about here in the near future. Option B, that continues to be the option that we're on or that we are in. So our county remains in phase 1. According to the Harvard model, we would still be identified in that red. And I would be recommending and that we continue to be 4K through 5 in person at this time and 6-12 stay in the hybrid model. Again, weekly regular meetings with the Dodge County Department of Health. They continue to encourage and support districts to provide in-person opportunities as we have since school started. Quarantine timeline. So this is one of the things, again, I'm not asking for action right now. I'll be waiting for that and asking for that at the end of the presentation. But essentially, I think most people are generally aware that the CDC provided some updated quarantine guidance flexibility. And not to get into the semantics too much, but it's not necessarily updated guidance. It's not that they're trying to guide people to look at an abbreviated quarantine period. It's that they've basically put out flexibility within their guidance protocols that allows schools, businesses, or otherwise to go by a 10-day abbreviated quarantine model. So essentially that flexibility was, instead of a 14 flat day quarantine for close contacts, the flexibility within the updated guidance could allow people to go with a 10-day option or a 7-day early test out option, so long as that test was on day 6 or later. The Department of Health and the Dodge County Public Health Department did adopt the flexibility, again, the flexibility in the guidance. I am not recommending at this time that we would change our current practices. I believe it is in our best interest to hold to our current quarantining procedures for the remainder of the first semester. I think the downward trend is optimistic. I think, yes, the quarantines can be disruptive, but they have worked, and we have evidence that would suggest that because of our quarantine timelines that we have used, at least during this first semester, that it has been of benefit because of realities associated with symptoms and positive cases after that 10-day have presented themselves. So I'm not saying that we wipe it off the map completely. I think that we need to revisit it. I think we revisit it in January. And we think about how things are going. We learn more about other adjustments that perhaps other people have taken advantage of, and then we continue to consider things moving forward. But at this time, I would be recommending and asking the board that we continue to stick with our protocols that we identified early on, and then would continue to be the protocols referenced as we'll call it a gold standard. And I think that's actually been referenced by some of the health departments. So the Families First Coronavirus Relief Act, that actually expires at the end of December. So if you haven't noticed yet, you will probably see more conversation on that, particularly coming out of school districts, because obviously that impacts, in particular, our staff. That Relief Act provided federally funded relief for staff that would either have fallen ill or become quarantined associated with COVID-19. We have had a number of staff that have fallen under relief associated with this act. With the expiration pending, there has been a lot of chatter regarding what districts are going to be doing or not doing relative to that relief. Right now, it appears as though, again, first blush, and a lot of things could change. It appears as though it might be a little bit of a toss-up, depending on the district, depending on their position. It's not necessarily a majority of people are definitely doing this or definitely doing that. It seems that a number of districts aren't planning on doing anything in terms of relief for staff as it relates to quarantines or otherwise missing work and the impact that that could have obviously on their compensation. So we have reviewed the status of this situation with legal counsel. Not that we did not ask the board's legal counsel for advice as to whether or not the board should decide to make an investment relative to our practices and FFCRA, but as far as the application of anything that we would be providing and the continuity and the potential inadvertent maybe discrimination associated with the application or inapplication of such relief. So what we are going to be recommending, we can tell you, is something that from the district standpoint, not saying financially, but just from a practice standpoint, would be protected and best practice. So we're going to be recommending that the district extend the relief that has been provided through the Family First Coronavirus Relief Act, but fund that through the district through January and reevaluate that monthly. So in other words, for staff, they would feel no change. They would feel no change. They would feel no impact as a result of this expiring. We do not know. We think that there is a chance there will be some type of relief that does happen at some point in time. Might not. Don't know if it would be federally or if something else happens at the state level. We do know that depending on how things happen, there is a financial impact on the district as it relates to providing this relief. And we do realize that sustainability might be an issue. So that's why we believe we should reevaluate it monthly. That said, the current usage of it and the anticipated usage, I think, is manageable. Again, we're just looking for a month at this point in time through January, and then we'd reevaluate it. But there isn't anything about the current trend or current usage that would lead us to believe that we couldn't manage at least a month and give ourselves an opportunity to continue to reevaluate it on a monthly basis. So that's where we're at relative to FFCRA. So activities and athletics, there's a lot going on. There's actually, I believe there's a game going on right now, about 82 feet from here. So in addition to obviously the winter sports season, we've got a number of musical groups at all levels that are participating and performing events using virtual tools and resources to record and share those out with families and with other people associated with those individual school communities. Our forensics and mock trial teams have formally begun their seasons. They have a number of events or competitions on the docket. Those are slated for those groups to be virtual events. Something else relative to our winter sports season, knock on wood, but we have had no team quarantines to date since the season began. I think that's positive. There have been some other teams that we maybe would have been competing against or had originally been on the schedule that have navigated different impacts, but we have remained healthy and have not had significant impacts associated with team quarantines since the seasons formally began. Our teams and the competitions associated with those athletic events have followed guidelines and protocols. There were a couple very minor instances where, a couple reminders had to be given to some of the student athletes, but nothing malicious, just simple reminders and continuing to sharpen the sword relative to our practice and implementation. But holistically, everybody is doing an outstanding job relative to the protective practices there. On or around January 11th, we're hoping to allow limited in-person fan attendance at home events. We are talking about 2 people from the household of the player. Not saying that it would have to be parents, but it would have to be at least one adult. The specific details are kind of to be determined, but we want to provide an opportunity for the members of the family to be able to come and support the student athletes during their participation. So we'd be starting very conservatively with how many people we would be allowing. But we're hopeful that on or around January 11th, we'd be able to allow at least 2 fans per participating student athlete. We also anticipate that on or around February 1st, we would start to allow outside groups to be able to come in and use indoor facilities, definitely with preventative and protective measures in place, limits relative to how many people could be in one space, and expectations regarding hygiene, following protocols while they're here, and in some cases doing some of their own cleanup or at least initial wipe down, depending on that use case. Looking ahead, we are beginning to plan forward to identify different ways that we can enhance and expand upon the in-person opportunities we've been providing for our students, particularly at the secondary level. As we know, in that hybrid model, they currently have 2 in-person days a week, depending on the identified cohort or group. We would like to work towards extending that later this winter, depending. Again, this is all dependent on trends. This is all dependent on the overall health of our district. But indicators right now would suggest that this is something we need to start spending more time on relative to the specific protocols, systems, questions that need to be answered, clarified, to start to actualize this. We have a number of teams that will be meeting to discuss this over the next few weeks. Those teams range from building leadership teams to district leaders, to members of the association will be talking about this with district leaders, to our return to school plan steering team, our parent advisory team, and our staff advisory team. We'll all have discussions on this. I think optimistically, I referenced later this winter, I like to have dates as far as goals are concerned. We're talking maybe early February at this point in time, but there is a lot to be done. And again, the trend needs to continue to look positive, and we have to continue to build some capacity and prepare. Also, on the looking ahead front, I will be recommending that we move to virtual the week following winter break and New Year's. The original thought regarding what we had done following Thanksgiving was somewhat hopeful, somewhat, obviously well-intended. There was good logic with it, but the data would suggest, and I will tell you based on numerous conversations with our health services staff, that there is a strong belief that it did, for our school community, it did provide a benefit, and as we can see by the cases and definitely by the quarantine impacts, it's something that we would like to do once again. So the request I am going to be asking for is requesting the board to support moving to virtual for K through 12 the week of January 4th through the 8th. Requesting that the board support the district holding to our current quarantine protocols through the end of the first semester. I believe the first day of the second semester is February 18th, January 18th, 19th. Thank you, Crystal. I don't know why I'm stuck on February. And then we consider a move that aligns with some of the guidance flexibility at some point thereafter. So we're not saying that we're sticking to it forevermore. We're saying through the end of the first semester. And then requesting that the board approve the extension of the relief provided by FFCRA funded by the district through January and reevaluated on a monthly basis. Questions, comments, discussion?
Questions, discussion?
Go ahead.
I appreciate considering the extension of the FFCRA. I think it's great to show how we invest in our staff and how we really want to keep people whole during this pandemic. I really appreciate the administration's looking into that and considering extending it.
With that being said, though, with the possible extension, as we look at that on a month-by-month basis, it'd be nice to know what that financial impact is, though.
Yeah, I mean, we'll be able to break that up on a monthly basis. I think worst case scenario, based on the amount of money that was invested, if you were to average it out, now, I will tell you, just go back to the graph, right? I mean, depending on the graph, you can see that different months had different impacts, et cetera. The other thing to keep in mind is FFCRA support or relief isn't something that can be used over and over and over again, right? So it applies for one use case or until the day threshold is reached, which is 10 days. So for some people who might be impacted again, that's not necessarily going to provide much of a benefit. But the other good news that I think our staff really understands is there are a number of things, depending on your position, where our staff are able to continue to work because we're able to leverage technology, we're able to leverage some of the flexibility in how we're operating. But I would think in a worst case scenario, 1 month could cost anywhere, around $20,000 or more. I think that's a worst case scenario based on the data we've seen and based on where numbers are right now. But that's why we need to reevaluate it monthly.
Mark, am I right to assume, so if we're going to reevaluate that monthly, it would be at our board meeting mid-month, and we would still be running it for like another 2 weeks. So what I'm saying is like, no staff would be notified, it was reported at last night's board meeting, and tomorrow it's stopping.
Correct.
They would have a couple of weeks' notice to make plans and figure things out.
Correct. And there is a general sentiment of optimism. I think a lot of educators tend to be optimistic people, but there's a thought that at some point in time there will be some type of action at the governmental level, whether it's state or at the federal level. There's a growing sentiment that it's likely going to be more at the state level, but who knows? I mean, there's enough other things that they're trying to navigate, but evaluating it monthly too also allows us to make adjustments or learn more about definitives, like for sure there's nothing coming at the state or federal level, or we can anticipate that effective this date and then we can adjust. But you're absolutely right, and people with this model, people would have at least 2 weeks, generally speaking, to prepare for that potential impact.
Yeah, I think all this is great, actually. I don't have a problem with it. I'm all for it. And especially if we can help, keep our staff whole at some point as long as possibly can. I think that's great. So with that, I'm going to move that we...
Hold on. I just want to make sure nobody has any other questions because I got a couple.
March.
Go ahead.
I was just going to comment. I'm glad you're asking for virtual learning that week after the Christmas holiday. I think we saw it with Thanksgiving, and I think it's a smart move at that time. And as far as the FFCRA funding, I agree with Tony and the board. If we can do it for our staff, great. But it is important that we do look at it on a monthly basis. So thanks for bringing it up.
Thank you.
Moving from that, I just want to clarify that we'll be virtual the week of the 4th, and then the next week, the last week of our semester, we'll be back in person. All right, I understand, like, the students understand this too, the health benefits of going virtual. I just know there's some academic, concern with the students, seeming that the week before our last week, we're going to be virtual, that our last days will be the 22nd and 23rd of this month, and we won't be back until the week of the 11th in January, and that is our finals week, and that it is made that we're having finals. So I know there's some concern academically on how well we're going to be prepared for that last week with finals that we must go through.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a good point. I think the high school administration is aware that generally speaking, as far as finals are concerned, there's probably some more conversations and supports or otherwise we need to consider, because we definitely do not want anything that we're doing during this return to school reality during a pandemic to be more of a burden than just the general sentiment or experience socially and emotionally of processing through it. And quite honestly, I really believe we need to keep the bar high for our kids because I think that's going to benefit them more in the long run. I also don't want to be in a scenario where, because we, in our thought to keep the bar high maybe weren't flexible in other areas where other students that, quite honestly, you're competing with for spots for, in colleges or jobs or otherwise, maybe had experienced more of a benefit of the doubt approach. So I know that our high school administration, the teachers are talking about those things, and I'm sure that they'll continue to do that because they know that that's real. And I would encourage, as we've seen this before, I would encourage students, and I would encourage you to encourage your peers to reach out and make sure that that is something that the students are talking about and are concerned about.
Yeah, I think with our structure too, I mean, we could do study groups and stuff like that in the meantime. I think the staff would be open to that, would be a guess.
So quarantine time, you're looking to keep the 14-day quarantine, and I think I probably wrote the date wrong. Wait till middle of February?
January.
Middle of January.
Through the end of the first semester. I used February, I apologize. Through January 18th. I heard a behind me, so I've been affirmed.
So the only thing I would maybe ask that we look at is, so I get things are working under the 14-day quarantine, and we don't want to really look at changing that. But I also look at that if we have, so right now, I mean, we're saying to staff, even if they have no symptoms whatsoever, they're out for the 14 days until they come back. It would be nice to provide an opportunity for staff to come back earlier, obviously knowing that they have no symptoms. And I get that the symptoms for COVID-19 can rear their ugly head all the way to day 14, and that's why the original quarantine was. But there's got to be some scientific evidence out there to say that that's much less transferable from day 11 to 14, or otherwise CDC and the health department would not recommend that and be following that. So all I'm saying is, we try to take we should try to take a closer look at that. I got to believe that there's staff out there that would love to come back on day 11.
Absolutely.
And if there's any way that we can provide that opportunity for them on an in-person level, we should try to do that. But I get the whole fact behind making sure we don't make a decision and then have a worse situation. And even if it's a modified guideline, I mean, if you took the 7-day and just said, you know what, we're not going to do the 7-day, but we just do the 10-day, then you don't have to worry about testing or anything like that. They do daily monitoring. Day 11 comes by, they've had absolutely no symptoms in that 10 days. I think providing our staff with an opportunity to come back early would be beneficial to some.
I appreciate that.
But Mark, do we have numbers on how many staff actually take time off? Because, for example, my children have had staff that have been quarantined who've taught virtually from home. So the reality is that even though they, quote unquote, may be quarantined, they are still doing their job.
Correct.
So, I mean, I think to some extent, I don't disagree at all with you extending a 14-day requirement till whenever you deem necessary for the people in our building. Because the reality is that if the person is not ill or if they are not encumbered by potential, small-aged children that they don't have other care for, they're still doing their job at their normal time during the day.
Yeah, many of them are able to do that. It depends on the specific position they have and what other types of supports we can have in that classroom so that the teacher can teach. But you're absolutely right. A number of people are able to perform their functions during the quarantine.
I mean, think of quarantining a class, or a cohort.
Right.
And you have the opportunity to bring, a whole classroom back, 4 days earlier and provide them 4 additional days of in-person education. Yep. Provide a staff member the opportunity to come back 4 days earlier. I think that's really where I struggle with not following that new guideline.
I can appreciate that, and as I had indicated, I think we will reevaluate it. I think you will have an updated recommendation, whether it's, me being stubborn or, us looking holistically and saying, hey, we've learned this over the last couple of weeks. We believe that we can go to a flat 10-day quarantine for the second semester. I just really believe that we have made outstanding progress, and there's a system in place that between our administrative staff and our office staff and our health services staff, that system is, we'll say, working well. And if we're going to make adjustments to that system, having a little bit more information and then putting an adjusted system in place at a specific point, let's say to start the second semester, I think would be a better approach.
It's confusing when they make a recommendation and, contrary to something they've done before on what everyone should do, but what is the community doing or the county recommending on these guidelines?
So, yes, that's interesting that you asked that. So, the county adopted the guideline flexibility, and I want to go back to, there still is a standard guideline. That's that kind of that gold standard. That's the 14-day piece. They adopted the flexibility. You can still see that they reference, they highly encourage, people who are working with or living with people who may be immunocompromised or more susceptible, or anything associated with the elderly or long-term care facilities. They're still really asking those people to stick to the 14-day. They did not reference in their published document schools in that. However, I can tell you that they encouraged us from a school standpoint to consider continuing for the time being with the 14-day period. Not in writing, not necessarily formally, but they know, and their nurses, their point resource nurses work with our nurses and know that it has been working. And I think there's a general thought that things are starting to trend a little bit more positively. Let's not jump to something new just yet. Let's see if this trend is going to continue for a few more weeks or another month, and then start to make some of those adjustments. So, but I get it. I get the updated guidance flexibility as well, and I look forward to a point in time where we can have less days for a quarantine.
So if we recommended on the 11th, when would it take place then, right away?
What was that, Tony?
It could take place anytime you wanted. I mean, if I was going to recommend a change, it would likely be a recommended change for the start of the second semester, or if there's another date that seems like it marries up well logically, could be the first week of February. But generally speaking, I mean, in my head right now, I'm thinking that any type of a recommendation would be something that would take place the second semester. So it'd still be a week.
I like the proactive discussions you're having in relation to any modification in the hybrid plan. I think the opportunity to get students back, even if it's one more day, but in your PowerPoint presentation here, it talked about Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, both cohorts. I think that would be really good, and I obviously know it has to do with where activity is and where everybody is, but I think the opportunity to modify that hybrid plan at some point here would be advantageous for the students, obviously. And then just my shout out to primarily the athletics. I know that the WIA guidelines are not very friendly to follow, but I appreciate our students following them to the best of their ability, knowing that by following them, they understand the importance of making their sports activities continue instead of being quarantined. So I appreciate their efforts.
I do have one more question. Before you were talking to that Australian group that was kind of like in the future ahead of us.
Yeah.
What are they doing with their kind of getting back into the jive of things?
I would be making it up if I told you what they're doing like right now. But since our initial discussion, they had gone back and forth on more than one occasion. Actually, shortly after our initial conversation, and Tony is speaking about an Australian district that we had been speaking with because they were ahead of us essentially relative to some of the impacts. But shortly after we had talked with them, which is the beginning of our school year, they had actually gotten an order for their whole region to go back virtually, but they've since been in person and then since been virtual again. So I don't know where they're at right this moment, though.
Mark, I have a question in regard to outside school groups. If we do open things up to them as of February 1st, do they have to sign anything that they're aware of what our policies are in regard to protocols for safety things? You know, that they are responsible for wiping down areas or anything like that?
At the current moment, I couldn't tell you for sure. So I think there's generally going to be requirements that they have. The idea of having all these outside groups sign waivers or commitments, it sounds good, but legal counsel doesn't always say that that's maybe best practice or needed because there is such an awareness of this. So it would be hard for someone to claim that we had no idea there was a pandemic that we were trying to work through. However, that would be something specific to any language before we started having those outside groups in. We would get confirmation as to what's recommended. And it could be something as simple as, you know, by coming here and using this facility, you're acknowledging X, Y, and Z, 1, 2, 3. But there will be expectations for them to continue to use it just from a, you know, I don't want to say a courtesy standpoint, but they're, depending on the group, you know, they might have to wipe down their chairs or might have to do other things. And we would supply, every room has E22 and some of the other things available for them to do that. But then by letting these groups in too, we're also accepting the fact that we have to clean up after them. And depending on the group and whether or not it's for-profit, you know, this or that, we are going to be taking on some, you know, some financial burden by allowing them in.
We talked about 2 changes in our protocols, one changing the quarantine time and the second bringing all kids back. Are you thinking about, like it feels like in the timeline, you're thinking about changing both those things roughly about the same time? And if we did that and our numbers started to rise, how would you know which one of the 2 things you'd done that caused that?
I don't know that I would. And we've talked about some of those things, and that's one of the reasons we've talked about like holding firm with some of them. That's one of the, we've talked through a variety of hypotheticals. You know, if we change the protocols, let's just say, to start the second semester, you know, we'd at least have 2 weeks. Now, granted, that might not be a ton of insight, but that's 2 weeks worth of data relative to that impact. But you'd need more than that, you know, to really have an understanding of it before, let's say, you started bringing kids back. I think what we're going to see is we're going to see some school districts who are just going to hold to the 14-day and ride that train as long as they possibly can, just because it is a variable, and they don't know if they're going to be able to match that up with other things. But some school districts, the day it went, you know, the day the adjustment came out, went right to it, right to that 10-day flexibility. So it might be hard to track where the impact is, but I mean, we'll know in that if we have situations where somebody who maybe came back all of a sudden goes back ill, I mean, we'll know those situations, but we won't know necessarily from a spread standpoint in all situations. So it's another variable we've been introducing.
Because that quarantine, to me, the quarantine timeline seems like it affects a lot less people than getting as many kids as we can back to school 4 days a week.
Well, with our current quarantine numbers, again, knock on wood, depending, you know, if they can hold, we're seeing the amount of people being quarantined going down. So overall, obviously, that impact is less, yeah. But that wasn't always the case. So we can go back only a month and a half ago, and we had, you know, not even a month and a half ago, a month, and you know, we had 280 people, 276 under quarantine, or more. So.
I am in favor of opening up February 1st to outside groups, but I think we have to limit the capacity, because I know, been here when there's basketball tournaments with a couple hundred adults and kids, and I think that's not good.
No, and I think relative to events, so a couple examples, just some general conversations I've had. One, from a youth sports standpoint, if we let them in to use it, it would be basically for their own teams, et cetera. They wouldn't be hosting large events. That wouldn't be on the docket. Even if our community music organizations were to come in to use a space to do some things following certain protocols or otherwise, we wouldn't be green lighting them having a large concert or anything like that.
I'm anticipating, Mark, based on what you have put in your update and your action requests, that we will be revisiting the data again at our January meeting so that we can look at the next updated numbers, anything else that might be coming from CDC before we make any decisions about February anyway. So
yes,
I'm pretty comfortable with what you're asking right now, and I definitely don't have a problem. Although I know everybody would like to be back in school, I don't have a problem with a couple of holidays still yet to occur with us holding off until the 11th. I understand the final exam question, and Abby, I'm sure that will get talked about and figured out.
Other comments, discussion? If not, John, now you can.
I was just gonna start at just saying that I move that we go to virtual learning for K through 12 the week of January 4th and January 8th.
You want to just say the rest of them too?
Yeah, you want to?
Yeah, that's fine. I'll also move that the district hold to the current quarantine procedures to the end of the first semester, and then consider a move that aligns with some of the guidance flexibility at some point thereafter. And also, I include in that motion that I also would move that we do the extension of the relief funded by the FFCRA, funded by the district through January, and reevaluate it monthly.
Second.
So Mary, do you want a roll call vote there?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we'll have a roll call vote then. Oh, sorry, was there a second?
Yep.
All right,
March.
good enough.
Yes.
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 Yep. Yes.
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 All right,
Thank you very much.
thank you, Mark. 9.5, recognitions. I'm going to start out with some information that'll lead into a recognition. So as the rest of the board has knows, we received a resignation letter from Laura Lerwick. That is why we're one short tonight. So Laura sent the board that to be effective last Friday, December 11th. Laura's resignation is a result of a family move out of district. Believe me, she wishes that she could be here and be part of the board, but obviously family matters dictated that move. The Board of Education will work through the process of filling her vacancy over the coming weeks, and then when selected, that appointed replacement will serve through April of 2022. Laura was a member of the board since 2012. She played key roles specifically around the areas of teaching and learning. I know that she was very involved with the gifted and talented programs. We could always count on Laura's honesty and transparency. Those that were in committee meetings know that for sure. And from my standpoint, there's no doubt that the Beaver Dam Unified School District is in a better place because of her involvement over those roughly 8 years. So on behalf of the full board, I wanted to send a sincere thank you to Laura Lerwick, and I wish Laura and her family the best on their future endeavors.
To be missed.
Other people have anything, recognitions?
I just want to actually recognize Joanne. Not specifically for something for the school district, but recently the Red Kettle concert that was done virtually this year was amazing. And Joanne had an awful lot to do with that. And so I know she's busy with a lot of things, but to take that under her wing, I appreciate that. Thank you, Joanne.
Thanks, Marge.
Outstanding.
Others? Mark?
I've got a few. I know I love all of you guys, but I will definitely miss Laura, so don't take that the wrong way. she's outstanding. So wish her and her family the best. Staff, students, and families, just continue to thank them for their patience. There's a lot of things sometimes that, people are going through individually or individual, stressors, and we make decisions or recommendations based on what we think is going to be best for the whole, and we realize that does not always hit the mark individually with people, but we certainly appreciate their patience and support. And then something that we didn't get to do, this summer and last year is recognize board members for their years of service. So board members are part of our staff family. So first is Chad. Chad, 10 years of service. You get this beautiful frame Mary Costin picked out.
Wow.
10 years of service for the Beaver Dam Unified School District. So here's this frame. You can leave it just like this for the camera if you want. So I'd shake your hand, but that's not part of our protocols. So that's not going to happen. And then I'd say a quarter of a century, but 25 years sounds so much more flattering. So here goes a beautiful plaque. My understanding is that you already have an outstanding frame. And then here is a crystal apple. So I'm not going to open it, but there it is. So congratulations and thank you for your service.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you, guys.
That's all I got.
Anybody else?
I think the play was, after our last meeting, the play was very good, musical.
Yep.
Yes. Outstanding.
I signed it myself.
Anybody else?
I just think, publicly, I know Laura's not here tonight, but I just really want to thank her for her service. She's going to be greatly missed, and she was a very valuable team member like we all are, and she'll have, the next person that we appoint will have some pretty big shoes to fill, I think, so.
I agree. Last call? All right, we're gonna move on to 10.1. I know, Abby, we missed you last month.
Yes.
But welcome back, and we look forward to what you have to tell us about student body.
All right. Hello. Yeah, as Mr. Prevey mentioned, I was gone last month. I was unfortunately quarantined. So I will be presenting what I was going to say last month. And that was going to be a presentation on the ACT and what our school does for us to prepare for that. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this and get into this is because during the last week of October, I walked into school and I saw something happening with the juniors that I've never seen before. In the commons, like in the entrance of our school, all the juniors were face down taking a mimic of the ACT, which is something that was not offered to my class last year. So that was something that was really cool to walk in and see, because we do take the ACT Aspire as freshmen and sophomores. However, once you actually take the ACT, you realize how different that really is from the way the ACT Aspire looks. So then I wanted to get more into the 2019-2020 school year of last year and what the school presented for the students in order to prepare them. So, of course, there was the PSAT, which was normally used for scholarships to get into colleges, but it also, a lot of students took that and used that to their advantage as like an indicator to see what areas of improvement they will need for that test they will be taking in March later. And then, so moving more into like our classroom settings, we have our English classes, which do a great job of helping prepare students for the ACT English style portion, because all the grammar quizzes taken in English classes are the same format that you do see in the ACT. So that is something that's very helpful to get you more familiar and comfortable with the test you will be taking later on. And then we also had something that was newer. A class was offered here in the auditorium. We brought an outside organization in, and they were offering ACT tips, and a book was also provided. The class that was offered, there was a fee to get in, and the fee covered, obviously, the outside organization coming in and the materials that the students received for taking it. It was completely optional. Students could opt in or not. And then some of the feedback that came from the organization coming in from the students, a lot of students were happy. They learned some information. However, they believe that the information that they learned was nothing that they couldn't have found on the internet, such as YouTube. TikTok become a lot more popular platform, and there's lots of accounts out there that offer tips and tricks for the ACT that were very similar to what that organization presented. And then going back to the class settings, certain classes did provide students with the single section practice tests. Like the English do the grammar quizzes similar to the English section, but in math classes, specifically pre-calc and the honors pre-calc course, they took the whole section of the math portion and sat down and took that, and then the students got to interpret what their score would be so they could really have an eye-opening experience to see where they will be doing on that portion. And then, so as I mentioned earlier, we had the new ACT test, and then I wanted to show what other schools around us, not only in our conference but locally, are also doing to prepare their students. So we have something to compare to. So then Waupun, that's more of a local school. They're not in our conference. To get these, I spoke to the students in the other districts, seeing what they did. And for their preparation in Waupun, they also did a pre-ACT, similar to what we offered new this year for the juniors. And they do not offer any incentives for students achieving certain scores on their ACT. Moving into a conference school, Watertown, they have a very rigorous preparation that they do for their students. The students take multiple practice tests throughout the year to help prepare them for the ACT they will see in the spring. In their core classes, math, science, English, social studies, they get practice packets that they go through every week that they will see on the ACT. And then they have certain classes that are set up where students can go and get the help they need for the ACT. They do have some incentives if they have a certain score, such as I believe it's a 24, they are allowed to have early release from their 5th hour, which by the sounds of it is similar to the flex we have offered at our school in the past years. And they also get the chance to have off-campus lunch if they receive a certain score. And then Waunakee, that is one of the schools in our conference, and they are well known for their high standardized test scores. So I was really interested in seeing what they do to prepare their students for their ACT. And the students there said that they have ACT and SAT workshops that the students are able to sign up for and opt in to get preparation, and they also took pre-ACT exams like Watertown, Waupun, and we did this past year, and their school district offered no incentives to their students. However, instead of incentives, the school district looks at it as an outlook to give the students, that instead of offering them incentives to do better and well on their ACT, they offered them an outlook that said, I want you to do good for yourself, because this is your future and this is where you'll go. And they offer them the perspectives. If you do bad, this is what may negatively affect you in your future. However, if you do good, this is the positive effects that you could see in your future. And then, so bringing that all together to compare that to our school new this year, we offered the pre-ACT exam, the mimic of the ACT. We offer the ACT Aspire to the freshmen and sophomores. They take that. They have decent indicators on how they'll do on the ACT. We have We've worked in practice tests for individual sections into certain classes, similar like English style grammar quizzes. And then our incentives that our school offers is if you score higher than you're predicted from your ACT Aspire, you get your automatic senior release, which I know a lot of students really appreciate that one. Senior release is a nice bonus to have, being able to go home. And then we have if you score 26 or higher, you can opt out of finals for your junior year of the second semester. That incentive obviously wasn't offered last year due to COVID. No students took their final exam. And so that wraps up our school district's incentives, just so all those can be compared to see how other school districts are doing to us. And then, so what it would be nice to see is more ACT prep work, like incorporated into our classes. That's comparing it to Watertown. Every week they go through that packet to help the students so they are more familiar, so it's not uncomfortable walking into a test that has such a weird style of questioning that you don't see in your normal everyday classwork. And then so that would be really beneficial to the juniors this year, trying to get more prep in because we aren't in school as much. So if there's any way we can incorporate that into like online school or anything, packets, because when you're not in school, you're not doing the writing and you're doing more Chromebook work, and the ACT is on pen and paper. You will be taking that test pen on paper. And I can tell you, after I took that writing section, my hand hurt because I was not used to writing that much. I'm used to my Chromebook sitting in front of me and my fingers working fast typing. So it would just be nice to see things more incorporated into our everyday life to help the students, because there is other options out there, such as like trades have become very popular. Manufacturing is very popular in our area, in Dodge County. However, those college-bound students, ACTs are looked at, no matter how like they're not as similar to like the test scores we take or the testing that we do in school. It's a different measure of intelligence that what we see, but is still like highly looked at and considered when going on to the pathways after high school.
Awesome. Any questions?
So my question was, based off your comparisons, do you have any recommendations for the district to help
Yeah.
with your preparations? And you actually answered that in your presentation. But with her being in this role, can we provide her a channel to maybe write a proposal and with her peers and give it to Rob and maybe administration? Or what are your thoughts, Chad?
Mark?
I think the best course is, I know that Mr. Tronson and his team are listening. I know that they recognize Abby's insights as being very valuable and appreciate the perspectives of the board. So I think this is probably something that they've already had conversations on in it's some way, shape, or form. That's what happens when you have a new teaching and learning guy. Those types of things will come up. So I'm sure that they'll continue those conversations, and they know that they've got some great perspective and great insight and easy access to Abby to continue those conversations.
Excellent. Thank you.
I think it's interesting. I knew some of the things that obviously Beaver Dam was doing from an ACT standpoint, but I wasn't aware of some of what other schools were doing. And it's nice to see Beaver Dam is doing, I think, equal to or above what other schools are doing. So that's good. And obviously, what Tony said is that even though we're doing, I think, a decent amount of things to encourage good performance on that test, we are always looking for opportunities to provide additional avenues to support students in doing the best that they can do in that test. Other questions, comments for Abby?
I have only one, Chad. And so Abby obviously is a senior. You and your classmates did not get the benefit of being able to say, yes, I got a great ACT score and I don't have to take my finals.
Yeah.
So is that another conversation that you have already had with Mr. Tronson? Or as a group of you have gone to Mr. Tronson and said, hey, we're seniors, can we have this opportunity now?
I know there has been talk amongst the seniors who did get the benefit that they should have gotten the benefit last year of the finals, who were thinking about going to Tronson and talking about that. That was earlier, and obviously everything about finals was up in the air. So I don't know. It looks like finals will be different the way they are, and nothing's set in stone, so that's kind of all up in the air. But I think that students recognize that their benefit of the ACT was that most colleges weren't requiring it this year for admissions. However, some were. So I know students recognize that our school year is different. So I know personally I backed down from getting those benefits that I wanted, because as I looked compared to other schools, we are very fortunate in the incentives we receive, because a lot of the other schools aren't offering what we do.
Okay.
Anybody else? Comment or question for Abby?
Very thorough. Nice job. Thanks, Abby.
Yeah, thank you very much, Abby. Appreciate it. That moves us to 10.2, Operations Committee.
Operations Committee met November 23rd. The 4 board members on the committee were present in person or virtually. Mr. Warwick, our District Facility and Safety Officer, gave us an update of what was going on with Speak Up, Speak Out. He provided information and also a demonstration of the anonymous tip line, along with where and how to access that, explained the process and the chain of command and the process that's followed when a tip is received, who gets it, how it's dealt with. Ms. Malkovich, our Director of Business Services, provided an update of our 5-year facility plan. I think the key word there was flexibility. The plan was originally adopted in 2019 with the intent that the plan would allow for flexibility, and some things needed to be flexibilitized. That's probably not an accurate word, but the Jefferson School project budget was higher than projected, and the plans for the high school bleachers to be replaced had to be done earlier because of the storm damage, which didn't necessarily allow for the sponsor funding that was originally intended. And as a result, some of the roofing projects that we completed were funded from Fund 10, and there were fewer upgrades completed at the middle school. The tennis court project is postponed a year to capture some efficiencies of completing other athletic field projects at the same time, so that you're not having to redo something a second time. And there remains uncertainty, of course, especially at the state level for 21-22, due to the impacts of COVID-19. The implications for 2021 are a smaller budget for building projects, since it is advisable not to take on additional debt in 2021 because we don't know where things are going to be. There are a number of district facility needs at various buildings, as we are well aware of from the facility studies, that need funding, and that funding needs to be determined. We also need to take into account the health of our district's general fund as options are explored. And of course, one of the options that we never like to talk about, but we will need to talk about, at least the possibility, might be a future referendum. Mr. Warwick then gave the committee a safety drills update. School violence drills were run in all school buildings in October and November, and I'm pretty sure everybody had a copy of each building's drills and the completion and the report. A summary of each of those drills, along with the highlights and areas to focus on for the next drills, were provided in that packet. It is a board responsibility to officially receive and approve the reports as presented. So I would move that we do go ahead and receive and approve board confirmation of the drills having been completed and submitted.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second then to approve the district safety drills for completion and the report. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those not, same sign. All right.
And then lastly, our next meeting is scheduled for January 25th, 2021.
All right. Any other questions for Bev?
Just a comment, I'd like to thank Pete for all the explanation on the drills that were done, and the follow-through on this was great. I mean, we hope we never have to utilize the shooter incidents at all, but to be prepared the way they are and to handle things in such a short amount of time to conduct a full drill was impressive. So, great job.
Yeah, thank you. All right. With that, we'll move on to teaching and learning.
The Teaching and Learning Committee met on November 16th at 5:30 at the ESC. Committee members present were John Kraus, Laura Lurwick, myself, and Gary Spielman. Dr. Schieffer, the Director of Student Services, reported on the district's strategic action to increase student and family social emotional outreach efforts unique to our current realities. She explained the definition of social emotional learning and provided an overview of the outreach efforts and the activities. She shared resources to help staff and families, including resources teachers use with students. She reviewed the various elementary, middle school, and high school activities to promote mental health wellness. She also reviewed the mission and vision of the district's allies in mental health education. Mr. Meyer, Director of Teaching and Learning, and Mr. Peters, District Assessment and Technology Officer, updated the committee on the comprehensive support and improvement and at-risk programming that we received a detailed analysis of this evening, so I won't review everything that they had done earlier. And then Mr. Meyer also presented the course proposals and curricular adjustments for the next year. He has new courses proposed for high school and revisions for high school English and high school science. And these proposals are part of the motion that we have for this evening. So I move the board approve the following course proposals and curricular adjustments. We have 2 new ELA courses, one in computer science and a language class for heritage Spanish speakers, which would be included as electives. In addition to those 2 new courses, 2 modifications to existing courses, our 2 half-credit ELA courses for grade 10 will be merged into one integrated course. In addition, chemistry and biology courses will move to utilize a pre-AP curriculum for all students rather than having separate honors courses.
Second. All right, motion and a second then to approve those course proposals and curricular adjustments as Elisa presented. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those not, same sign. All right, those are approved.
And the next Teaching and Learning Committee meeting is on January 18th.
Any other questions for Lisa? All right, onward to board engagement. This is an opportunity for the board to share out any engagement opportunities they had during the course of the last month. So I will open it up for comments.
I attended that webinar for the COVID-19 joint webinar for public health, school nurses, superintendents, and school boards. I'm not taking anybody else's thunder, am I? It was actually really good. They did a comparison on several overnight camps. One was actually in Wisconsin, and it showed how one kid infected 76% of all the people at that camp. I don't have that number handy, but, and then they compared it to another overnight camp in, I think it was New York area, where they followed guidelines similar to what we do in a school, and they were able to mitigate it much sooner, and it didn't result in a massive spread amongst the camp. And then they also went into detail a little bit about the new map that I believe we're using that shows a little bit more detail and district specific. So it was a really cool presentation. It was very well put together and kind of short and sweet.
Others?
I had a lot of time at home last month, so I could participate in some online opportunities, and I got to attend the parent advisory meeting virtually, and I found that really a valuable experience. I enjoyed it. There was a nice representation of parents from all grade levels, as well as all student abilities. I wouldn't even say abilities, but different levels of students, so that I felt like it was a really good cross-section of representation, and was really impressed with those parents there. I also got to attend the high school student council meeting, and I just want to really give a shout out to them because they are unable to do a lot of the things they would be doing this year as student leaders, and they're still finding a way. So I really wanted to just call them out on that and thank them for their service and for doing whatever they can. So really appreciated that, and look forward to attending those meetings again.
All right. Others? All right, well, I did attend our safety team meeting, so we talked about all the stuff we talked about in that meeting. We also, John and myself also met with Mark and BDA. I think one of the things that we've kind of developed through this time of the pandemic is some regular and constant communication with BDA, which we will continue to do. Also was on the staff advisory, and a lot of the stuff that we talked about in staff advisory had to do with, cohorting, sports and the effect of sports, virtual staff requirements, and then some of the things that Mark talked about within the return to school plan. Also attended Lincoln PTO. We try to have some board involvement on the PTO meetings for each school of the month. So I was able to attend Lincoln's PTO, although a little shorter this time. Zoom didn't quite give us an hour. They only allow us a half hour this time. But I'm always amazed, even in that half hour, the amount of things that PTO organizations do for our schools. They were discussing virtual fundraising options, discussing the typical fall fun run being done in the spring, hopefully, if COVID numbers continue to go the way they're going. This PTO also provided Thanksgiving bags to staff. They're also brainstorming options for kids for the holidays. And then, really interesting for me, because I didn't even know this existed, was a discussion on Girls on the Run. And hopefully other PTOs and other schools do some of the same thing. The Girls on the Run, a nonprofit program that works to encourage development and self-respect and healthy lifestyles in preteen girls through dynamic interactive lessons as well as through running games, all of which accumulates into a celebration 5K run. And it was interesting listening to them discuss all of this in the virtual environment we're in, and still having these girls be involved and prepared, hopefully at some point, to be able to run that 5K. So that was very interesting. Other involvement, engagement?
Just I sat on that meeting with you with the BDA. My days are kind of mixed up after this last month, so, to say the least.
All right, well, I appreciate the board's involvement, all the way from webinars to involvement in PAT, SAT, PTO, BDA. I think it shows that the board is fully involved and engaged in the majority of what we do, so I appreciate your involvement in that. I gotta find my note now. All right, so typically we move to closed session at the end of the meeting. We're going to change that up in this agenda and future agendas to do that prior to going into district policy and guidelines. So with that, I'll have somebody move to go to closed session.
I move we go into closed session per Wisconsin Statute 19.85, Parent 1, Parent C, to consider employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, specifically to discuss specific employees. The board will reconvene into open session for the possible transaction of business and adjournment.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second then to move into closed session. The board will recess into a back room here, and we will hopefully be back in about 10, 15 minutes.
We have to take a vote.
We need to vote.
I was getting ahead of myself. We'll do a vote then.
Yes.
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 All right. Now, we'll be back in 10, 15 minutes.
I'm sorry, where are we going? 507. If people need to use the restroom.
Have you taken off? I am. All right, thank you very much. Appreciate the report. Appreciate your continued involvement.
I talked to Thompson, I share my reports with him.
Yep.
Yeah, so.
I would get on him. I would say, you know what, after I gave my presentation at the board fully supported doing whatever we can.
Yeah.
So see what he says.
Yeah, I'll go back. I'll keep talking to him. Every time something comes up, I speak to him about it. There was something I spoke to him about that I really wanted to share with all of you guys, but he said I have to get, I took sociology class. We did a school-wide survey, and it shows like the percentages of how kids are doing and what they want to see. So I have a handout. I have to get it approved by Johnson before I can give it to you guys, but I think that'd be really cool for you guys to see.
Yeah, I mean, quite honestly, if he's okay with it, providing it to the board, if you want to give it to me or email it to me,
Yeah.
I can then email to the list of board members.
All right, yeah.
All right?
All right, thank you.
All right, have a good night. Thank you.
Oh, she's still here.
I told Mark he had to hurry up.
Poor thing.
Did you get your magazine done at least? 'Cause we can go back if you want.
It's a great question. Is it on there?
I don't remember doing that before.
You're just patiently waiting for us.
Well, you kind of did that. You adjourned it, but I would, just as a formality.
You got everybody here?
I think so.
All right, just as a formality, we're going to reconvene into open. Do we have a motion to reconvene?
Yes.
Motion and a second then to reconvene into open. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Then we will move on to 13, district policy and guidelines with 13.1.
Okay, we have one retirement and one resignation for your consideration this evening.
I move the board approve the retirement and resignation as presented.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the resignations as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those not, same sign. All right.
There's also one leave of absence for your consideration tonight.
I move the board approve the leave of absence as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second then to approve the leave of absence as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
All those not, same sign. All right.
And there are 3 appointments. 2 of them are a limited term.
I move the board approve the appointments as presented.
Second.
And we have a motion and a second to approve the appointments as presented. Roll call vote, please.
Yes.
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 Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. Sorry for making you stay late.
It's very important.
All right, other business, payment of claims.
I move the board approve payment of claims in the amount of $6,417,917.13.
Second.
Motion and a couple seconds to approve the payment of claims. Roll call vote, please.
Yes.
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 And motion to adjourn, please.
Also move.
We have a motion and a second for adjournment. All in favor?
Aye.
All those not? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Happy holidays,
you.
everyone.
Thank you very